Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us in this brief demonstration on creating a more interactive experience in your online focus groups. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes to make mention of. First, we are scheduled for 30 minutes. So in that time frame, we will refrain from answering questions until the very end. You can submit your questions through the Q&A icon you see in the Zoom portal. So please feel free to do that at any time during this conversation. We'll get to those questions at the end. And we will be recording today's session so that we can make it available to you and others for sharing ideas as we move into this new reality that we're all find ourselves in. I'm Eric Elzoon. I'm the Senior Vice President at Dial Smith. Over the past few weeks, I've fielded dozens of calls and inquiries about how to take that in-person interactive focus group experience and recreate that in an online environment. It's because of the volume of these calls that we decided to address some of the most commonly asked questions through this format that we're doing today. During our time together, we will be having a live demonstration that illustrates the online survey dial testing capabilities as we integrate that into a traditional online focus group. We'll share the respondent experience with you so you can see what your respondents would go through as they are taking the surveys in this type of platform, as well as sharing you real-time dial data as a result of that data collection. So we'll be sharing all of that with you. So please hang tight and we'll get to that in a moment. Today I am joined by several of my colleagues. The first, David Paul, the CEO of Dial Smith. Hi, David. Thank you for joining us.
Great.
The second is Gina Derrickson, the Director of Research at Engages. Hi, Gina. Thank you for joining us as well.
Hi, everyone.
David, let me start by asking you a question. And I'm sure many of those on this call today were in a similar frame of mind about a month ago. And you as a small business owner, what was going through your mind when conferences started canceling and projects started coming into question and canceling? What was going through your mind at that time?
Well, I'd say first panic set in, but then I took a deep breath and remembered what's important. And I made sure all the liquor stores were still open. And they were. So I stocked up and then I came home. And then I sat down and got to work and realized that we have to be ready for whatever's coming. And research has to continue whether people can gather in person or not. And that's where we took all of the legacy capabilities that we've had to do work online and made sure that they were fully up to snuff to handle whatever was going to start coming.
Thank you. And now that we're more than 3 weeks into this evolving crisis, has that mindset changed at all, evolved along with the crisis?
It has. My blood pressure is down significantly, which is great. And we've fielded a good half dozen studies over the last week and a half through all types of online means. So it's definitely helping to see everything coming together, and it's great to see that our clients and their clients are continuing to do work. So yeah, it's changing and changing a little bit for the better.
Good. I hope that's a common theme throughout all business owners as various stimulus has come into place and we're adjusting to the reality of times. Gina, you've moderated over 800 focus groups in your career, many of which have been online focus groups. Can you give us a sense of what some of the core differences you find between an in-person focus group and an online focus group?
Sure, Eric. So there's a couple key differences to me, and the first one is engagement, and there's just a different level of engagement between moderator and the client team and moderator and the respondents, and it just takes some getting used to and learning some techniques that you can help the online experience be more engaging for everybody involved. Next, there's technology. And, I never met a moderator who said, I chose this profession because I love troubleshooting technology. I'm included in that. So, it takes some learning and some trusting the technology. And for me, it's really important to have strong partners to work with. And that's where I think the Dialsmith team is really strong and really reliable, and they help me out of several crutches. And lastly is before now, we've never had the ability to be able to dial test and get live data back when we test videos like we did in person. So that was a key difference. And now I'm happy to say it's not anymore. So we can do all of that online.
That's right.
So,
And we're going to show you how we do that in this environment through this demonstration today. I'm
yeah.
also joined by 2 additional colleagues, Dan Welch, our VP of Products and Services, and Brian Eisenson, our Director of Marketing. They're here in a support role. You may hear me calling out to them occasionally through this demonstration just for support, or if we have a question that might be better suited for them, we'll call on them to answer those. So thank you, team, for joining us today, and we'll get right into this demonstration. As we think about online focus groups and how we feel those projects, they really fall into one of 3 categories. The first and most basic of these is the virtual online qualitative focus group. We evolved that one level by adding a quantitative survey or a dial test in advance of fielding the focus group component. This gives us some additional insight into what's on the minds and attitudes of those focus group respondents. Then we can field that focus group. The third way is to make that focus group an interactive experience with the respondents. And that's what I really want to focus on today, is how do we create an engagement level that can't be achieved through a traditional, more basic virtual focus group. So I'm going to take you through a brief demonstration. And in this demonstration, we're all going to play a role. I'm kind of leading the discussion today, so I'm going to play the role of the moderator. My 2 respondents are going to be those on screen with me, David and Gina. They'll play the role of the respondents, and I'm going to give them some tasks to do as we go through this demonstration. And all of you, most importantly, play the role of the client team, the research team, and you're going to be tucked behind the safety of that glass. So envision that you're sitting in a focus group environment, you're behind the glass. This is the level of experience that you're going to be viewing as we go through this demonstration. Before we dive into that though, Gina, for those of those that are on this call that are a little less familiar with online focus groups, what techniques do you find particularly successful in setting the tone for a session?
Yeah, so for me, when it's online, it's a little different. I talked a little bit about the engagement is different, but I think what I like to do is have a really strong, well planned out introduction, not just names and maybe something category or topic related, but I like to ask something of a personal relationship, because what I'm looking for is I'm looking for respondents to be able to connect in a way that they would have probably connected if they were sitting in a waiting room or sitting next to each other in an in-person group. So that like, oh, I really like your purse. Where did you get it? Or, oh, you're a Red Sox fan, or, like that kind of conversation that helps build a little bit of rapport between respondents doesn't happen online. So I like to ask a personal question. It can be a dumb question. And, if I was doing a group today, I would probably say, what's the favorite thing that you like about spring? And some people would say, I love the flowers that are blooming. And other people would say, it's baseball season. I'm all about that. And other people would say, my birthday's in April and that's why I love it. But your people online will find a way to bond and connect. And that's what you're looking to hit really early on to be engaging for them.
And these respondents, as you talk to them, they're in essence inviting you into their home. Has that made an impact on the type of research you conduct? And if so, how?
Well, I mean, it's nice to be in their home. Oftentimes in projects, we go through great efforts to be invited to their homes to get a little glimpse behind the scenes of, what does their house look like? What do their pets look like? Whatever is relative or relevant to the topic that you're discussing. So that's great, but you also need to plan for the interruptions that come with their home environment. Things like dogs barking and kids crying and delivery guys ringing the doorbell and the phone ringing and all of those things. And I talked a little bit about the planning planning that's required in advance. And we start all the way back at recruiting when we set expectations, telling people that, treat this commitment like a job. Of course, they're getting paid generously for it. So, if you need daycare, make sure you have daycare. Be sure you're in a place where you can turn your phone off for 90 minutes or 2 hours or whatever the commitment is. But I like to state it in a way so that it's like, we expect 100% full participation for you, and then you'll get your incentive so that they know that that is a condition of them getting paid for their time. It's not just them sitting in the chair.
That's right. And setting those expectations about finding those quiet spaces in your house, also setting the expectations about what type of technology they'll need. Starting that at the recruiting moment really sets the group up for a good level of success. And that's where my team would come in and help play that role so that we're identifying what type of technology is needed.
Yep.
So as we progress through a traditional, more basic online focus group, and to make it more engaging and interactive, we had to interject those conversations with elements such as an online survey, or in this case, an online dial test. And to do this, it's very, very basic for us. We give the set of instructions to the respondents, just like a moderator would in an in-person focus group. We set those expectations, we tell them what to do, what we want them to experience, what type of scales to evaluate, and so forth. Once we set that level of expectations, we chat out a link to their private chat window that they can click on and take that survey, do that experience that we've asked them to do. While they're doing that, we place them on a brief hold and to let them know prior to that they should rejoin Zoom once they're complete and raise their virtual hand, which is an element of the Zoom portal, to let us know that they've finished their exercise and ready to rejoin. But with them on hold, it removes them from the conversation. They can't hear us. They can't see us. So we as a research team can view the instant results that are being generated by their dial lines. The respondents can't see this at that point. If we choose to talk about it, formulate our game plan, take a look at elements of their data that we want to address in a follow-up conversation, that allows us to do it in private while they're on hold. Once we're done with that game plan, we can go back into the front room and rejoin our conversation with the respondents, carry on, and repeat that process. So we're going to do this simulation for you, but before we do, David's going to take you through a brief description of what that respondent experience is.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So what you're going to see here on the screen is where the online dial testing experience would begin. And generally, we would start with a demographic question or two so that you can segment and subset your respondents just like you would for an in-person dial testing exercise. Once they've completed that, the video will begin to play. And as it does, they'll use their mouse to move the slider on the screen right to left, just as they would move a traditional dial and turn it right to left. So the farther they slide to the right, the more favorable they feel. The farther they slide to the left, the less favorable they feel. We're polling that slider position every second, just like we poll dials every second. And there's also that optional button that you see down below labeled "Buy It" in this case. So in the case of perhaps an advertisement or an infomercial, that might be a buy button. And if at any point during the ad a respondent would make a purchase, they could click that button to indicate that they would buy it. When we do TV pilot testing, it's traditionally labeled as a tune-out button. And if they would stop watching at any point in time and change the channel, they would click that as a tune-out button. After that, they continue to go on and rate the video all the way through to the end.
Thank you, David. So as we go through this demonstration for you, again, we would set the expectation with our respondents. We would give them the instructions. So now that you have those instructions, Gina, David, I'm going to chat out that link to you to take this survey. Before you click on that, I just want you to know that I'm going to place you on a brief hold. When you come back, please rejoin Zoom, raise your virtual hand so we know that you're complete, and we'll rejoin you just as soon as we're able. So go ahead, click on that, and we will place you on a brief hold.
Okay.
So Gina and David are clicking on that link. I am placing them on hold now. You'll see their screens disappearing. So they are still with us, but they are in a hold position. They can't see us or hear us at this moment. They're taking their survey. We're going to show you that back-end data now. And we'll just wait a moment to see them come into the session. If you see towards the top of the screen, we see how many active participants there are in the survey. And we start seeing the dial lines being generated. What you want to focus on primarily is that center graph. In that center graph, we really get to see and visualize the peaks, the valleys, the moments that aren't causing movement, and so forth, so that we can visualize what's happening, use that video as more of a reference point. Don't focus so much on that, but focus on those lines. We can easily turn on or off subsets by simply clicking on those boxes. Now we should be able to see both males and females. We can activate both those subsets. And we'll just pay attention and make mental note of what is causing dips, what's causing peaks. There's a nice strong movement.
I don't know where we parked. I was following you.
And now that data collection is complete, we can refresh the screen and see if any of those take action buttons, the buy it button, were pressed. And those are represented by green dots in that center graph. We can, as a research team, now discuss some of those peaks and valleys, see what we want to probe on deeper. And once we have our game plan finalized, we can rejoin those respondents in the front room. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to readmit them. You'll see their videos come back up on the screen, and we'll continue our conversation. Welcome back, David. Gina, are you with us? There you are. Thank you. So how was that? How did you feel about using that type of technology to give your dial ratings?
It was seamless and really easy for me.
Great, great.
I think it's the greatest thing ever, and everyone on the planet should do it.
Most definitely, most definitely. So of course, we just repeat this process as much as necessary throughout the focus group. Keep engaging with the respondents at different levels, and be able to draw the conclusions at the end of our study. So instead of hearing me talk at this point, I think it's more important to see what's on your mind. So we're going to open up that Q&A portion of our discussion and see what's most important and what's on your minds, as we are all kind of evolving the way that we conduct research at this point. David, here's a question for you. What is the sweet spot for the length of the video that you would want during a dial testing online type exercise?
That's a good question. Really, we can handle any length of video, everything from 30-second ads to 2 to 3 minute sales messages, all the way up to 22 and 44-minute TV pilots. Some of that will help determine whether the better methodology is to send it out in a survey in advance, especially for longer form content. And that will give also the researchers time to review those results before everyone comes together for the online focus group. But we did a project last week where we were testing full-length pilots, just like you just demonstrated with everybody here live, and it worked great as well. So there's really no technical limit, and I think, you know, anything common from really 30 seconds to even 60 minutes, there's a methodology to work that out.
All right, and is there a best way to handle videos that are more than 30 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, we can either do it straight through, depending on the type of content. Sometimes we will recommend breaking it up, maybe at some natural breakpoints. So if it's a presentation and it's shifting topics after every maybe 10, 12 minutes, it's a good time to put in a transition, maybe take a short break and then start the next one. Sometimes that's applicable, and sometimes it's preferable to just keep it all together and roll it all the way through. And we can really accommodate any of that.
Great. And Gina, here's a question for you. Web IDIs versus focus groups, web focus groups. What factors determine what or which of those is the better fit?
Yeah, so web IDIs versus focus groups, I think I would use the same criteria as for in-person. Personally, I'm a huge fan of IDIs. I really enjoy getting to know somebody all the way, understanding their full perspective of an idea. So I tend to gravitate there when we can. But I know there are times when you want that group interaction, you want people building off of different opinions and different ideas. So that's the time to go for a group. And, sometimes just time that the team has dictates a group is a little bit more efficient time-wise. So, but it's really the same.
Great. And Gina, have you encountered specific types of focus group respondents that adapt well to online technologies more seamlessly compared to others?
I think, well, you could stereotypically say, of course, younger people are used to online technology more than older people. But I've used Zoom for a couple years now, and I think when I compare that to some of the earlier online platforms like Adobe Connect, I think Zoom is really easy. I always say I'm in a Bible study with a woman in Arkansas. Her name is Winetta, and she's like, I don't know, she's 80 or 90 something, but she's an older lady and she has no problem at all. So, if you can build a platform for Winetta, you're good for most of the people.
Yeah.
We also have tech checks that we can work with people in advance if they signal to us that they're a little weary of getting online and uncomfortable. So.
Yeah, and I was a part of a couple focus groups last week where there were several respondents in their 80s, and they pulled out their iPads, they fired up their cameras. I had to coach them a little bit about or about being able to switch the view of their camera from a front-facing camera to the rear-facing camera, or vice versa. We saw some toes at some moments, had to coach them through getting it to reverse to show their face, light their faces, and things like that. So that's all part of what we do in advance to make sure that the technical experience is as seamless as it can be. Let's see. Is there an ideal number of participants in these online focus groups, Gina?
Yeah, so that is somewhat a matter of preference. I also tend to go smaller. There's 3 of us on the screen. I think you can see us pretty well, but you could imagine if there are a lot of people, then, just faces get smaller. It's not impossible, but of course you hear from people less. So I'm a huge fan of the group of 4 to 5 people plus moderator. Makes a nice little 2x3 grid on the screen that's really easy to manage. But in the case when you're doing the interactive dial testing, sometimes 5 or 6 data points isn't enough. You want to see a little bit more. So then, I would say go to 10 or 11. But that's a lot of people. You're not going to hear a ton from each individual. So I would probably max out there personally.
Thank you. And David, pricing compared to in-person dial groups, how would you say that the price compares?
Oh, yeah, it's a good question. In general, the price does come in a little bit lower. First of all, you're taking out the obvious hard costs of travel, and if you're using dials, shipping of the dial gear. From the standpoint of the way we charge for our services, we're able to charge a little bit less because we're not spending travel time, spending a day getting to and another day getting from where we're going. So there are more efficiencies there. So we're generally seeing the price points come in a little bit lower. That's the way so far it started to work out for us.
Great. And Gina, anything to add on that question?
I would only say I think that now is a really good time to try it because of people being at home, having more time on their hands, kind of looking for something to do in interactions. That I'm hearing that recruiting is going a bit faster than what we typically see just because people are at home answering their phones and they're reachable.
Great. And David, is this a standalone Dialsmith solution, or is it something that can be integrated with other platforms such as Qualtrics?
Well, so the online dial testing tool that we demonstrated can be integrated and interfaced with other platforms. So we offer end-to-end full service, whether it's surveys or dial groups like we're demonstrating here. And then taking steps back from that, we can also offer just the online dial testing capability that we can either interface with a client's own online focus group platform, or depending on the survey platform they use, interface with their surveys as well. So both.
Great, great. Let's see. Dan, I'm going to ask you to bring back up the back end of slider metrics. We have a question that it kind of addresses that. Thank you for sharing your screen, Dan. The question is, if the team is reviewing a steep change in ratings, can you click on the graph and see exactly where the video or where in the video that takes place? Or do you have to be scrolling through the video based on time code in a separate screen? So yes, you can click and scrub through this at various time points and play those clips to see what is causing the peaks, the valleys. And keep in mind, human nature, it's usually something that happens a couple seconds in advance of that peak or that drop. So yes, it's very easy to scrub through, see what happened at those moments. And as part of the research team, you would have access to the back end as you're doing your reporting to be able to see this level of data and changes in the lines. So thank you for sharing that, Dan. For the two of you, and I have a comment on this too if you don't address it, would this platform allow for a larger group, let's say 25 people, and then dismiss all but, let's say, 5 or so for a more in-depth conversation?
I can take that. Absolutely, it does. And what we've done in the past is you can have 25 or 100 or how many people you want evaluate the video. And we've done it before where we don't even bring them onto the screen until after they go off and do that dial exercise and come back. But we can pick and choose based on the demographic responses, based on dial data, based on a lot of criteria that we can call out in advance. So then you just pick and choose those people that come back. It's really effective. That's a great question.
Yeah, and we often do that in the case of content testing or TV pilot testing, where we'll start with that larger group. We'll have a discussion with a large group, potentially introduce them to that survey component, look at the data in real time, and then select those individuals to promote to a panelist so that we can see them, interact with them, and dismiss everyone else. So yeah, very, very easy to do in a platform like this. And that kind of a follow-up to that is a question about, so instead of doing their usual groups of 20 to 25, would we recommend more doing 2 groups of 10 or so? So I think we've kind of hit on that with our previous conversations as far as how you want to be able to engage with these individuals. Of course, the great thing about Zoom is that the more people you add, the more people are visible on the screen. It's just very difficult to be able to moderate a discussion with any more than, let's say, 8 to 12 people. So I would recommend starting small, get your feet under you, build up to a much larger group like those that you're used to in person. So I think it differs depending on the type of results that you're trying to get, your methodology, but anything is possible. It's just what's best for the platform. I'm just scrolling through some of these questions, so thank you all for submitting those. Here's a question for you, David. How are we currently handling payment? Perhaps, I'm not sure if that's for us as a company or if that's for the respondents.
Yeah. Well, for us as a company, we take cash, check, credit card, money order. You can drop drop bags of cash at the door, no problem whatsoever. Assuming that we're talking about incentives to respondents, it would be handled the same way. It would be done traditionally. So normally we would work through a traditional recruiter, and they would recruit for online focus and dial groups the same way they would for in-person, and then they would distribute the incentives just like they normally do. We've also had a few projects where we've taken on the distribution of those incentives for one reason or another, which is also perfectly fine. So, one of the traditional methods. And if there's a one-off project that has something strange about it, we'll just work with you and figure out how best to handle it.
Great. There's a question about examples of reports that are not sales or product related type focus groups, and could we share those? To best address that, we ask that you send us an email, and we'll definitely get in contact with you and see what is most relevant to you in the type of research that you're conducting. So you can email me. My email is very simple. It's Eric, ERIC, @dialsmith.com. I'd be glad to take that conversation and see what it is that you need that we can help sell this as a product to your clients. Are any other tips for the kinds of questions you can ask online versus face-to-face? Imagery, sentence completion, and so forth.
Yeah, I'll take that. So those are some projective techniques. And I think, projective techniques are possible. It's just different. And again, that's kind of where the planning comes from, to think through collaboratively, how do we replicate that experience that we're so comfortable with doing face-to-face and make it work online. For imagery, you can do it a couple of ways. You can send a deck of images in an email to participants beforehand and then instruct them, this is the time you want to open that deck and scroll through the pictures. And of course, you would have them coded really well so they can share what they're showing to you. You can also share your screen with, 10 or 15 images on the screen. It's a little different than throwing a massive amount of pictures on the table and having them go crazy, but it does work, and you can do exercises like that. I personally love to do a love letter exercise when you're talking about branding and company satisfaction and retention. And that's something where I give them prompts to where they fill in like what they love about a company and what they need to see from the company to have a better relationship. It's great exercise, but that's something that you can send in advance, and you can have them fill it out and hold it up on the screen. You can have them email back to you at the end, and you can have that a condition of, when I get that back, that's when you get your incentive. So there are all kinds of ways to kind of handle the logistics of that, and we'd be happy to think through those and what works best for you.
Great, thank you. Any special considerations for allowing clients to observe in this type of environment? David?
Yeah, so clients will come in very much like the way all of our webinar attendees are in now. So they're in a view-only mode. We generally recommend that they come in with initials only, no first and last name, because we always have a technical support person on. We can also always change someone's name. So if someone reveals too much about themselves, we can easily change that before we let the respondents in from the waiting room. And then there's also that critical communication between, let's say, the research firm and the end client, and maybe even with us on the technical side. And usually that'll be taken offline to another platform like Slack or a Google Hangout or WhatsApp or something, so that none of that chatter happens here within this platform, and this one stays clean between the moderator and the respondents. And then all that backroom chatting goes on another screen using whatever other platform our clients or their clients prefer.
Great. And David, can you also talk about the security around the Dialsmith platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a video standpoint, we're using all best-in-class security protocols. All of the videos are hosted by a tier 1 CDN, which is the service that actually hosts and serves the videos. All right-click capabilities have been disabled. Any way to access the source of the video has been disabled. So all respondents have the option to do is hit that play button one time. The video plays, they rate it, and it goes away, and that's the end of it. So lots that's already built in, and happy to go into that in more detail, case by case as needed.
Great. As a researcher, this is another question. As a researcher, what steps do you take to make sure your respondents can actually navigate through Zoom, then to the online dialogue environment and back?
Yeah, so this is where those advanced tech checks come in handy, where we can actually, a day or two before the group, we can schedule an appointment with each respondent where they log on to Zoom. You know, we're on the phone with them and they're on Zoom, and we're walking them through to make sure they're set up for success. We can take them out to dial, test, to sample something so that they see what the experience is. We can hold their hands through all of that part. I think to me, it probably depends on how difficult of a recruit is it. Most people can handle that on their own easily. So would you rather, you know, over recruit by a few and risk maybe losing a few people on the way that don't make it back to Zoom? Or do you want to spend the detailed time in advance and walk them through and make sure that 100% of your people can come in? And I think for me, it just depends on how difficult of a recruit is it.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, really before every study, there's always a tech check email that goes out to respondents with all of the basic requirements of what they're needed to do, and ask them to download any installer in advance, sometimes give them links to try things out. And then to Gina's point, that next level of tech check would be where we either reach out to all respondents in advance and walk them through everything, or for those who respond to the tech check email with a question is where we help them one-on-one, either by email or get on the phone with them, so that by the time the group starts, ideally everybody's good to go.
Great. And our final question, we always recommend to clients that with an in-person focus group to start planning at least 2 weeks in advance, recruiting, getting the survey instrument built, and so forth. How much lead time do we require for an online type focus group?
I'll say that it's pretty similar, because the recruiting process is more or less the same. And to Gina's point, right now recruiting is actually going pretty fast. That's not going to necessarily always hold up, but we're really using about the same timelines as in person. It can be compressed, whereas, you know, in person we might often have a 3-week lead time from project kickoff to when recruiting starts and everything. And now being able to do it in that 2-week period is really no problem, because we don't have the consideration of buying travel tickets and travel schedules and things like that. So with that said, we can also turn it much faster. I mean, a couple weeks ago, we did an online study where we only had a few days notice, and the recruiter that we worked with was great. And, you know, we pulled it off in a few days. So we don't want to commit to that all the time, but it's certainly possible. But that 2-week window seems very reasonable.
Great. David, Gina, thank you very much. For all of you, I just want you to know that we're here to help. This is a transitional time for all of us. It's new. It's something that this industry has never had to encounter before, and hopefully we never have to again. But we're here to talk with you, share ideas and experiences, brainstorm with you on what we can do to keep this vertical research viable through this time. People have more opinions than ever with the political season coming up, with COVID-19 upon us. People want to talk. They want to share their opinions. So let us know what we can do to help. As I mentioned before, we are recording this demonstration. We'll make this available to you so that you can share it with your team, and hopefully keep those conversations building, those ideas building as we go through this time. So that concludes our session for today. Thank you all very much for joining us. Please stay safe, stay well, and thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.